Does the Gulf Cooperation Council have a future? New questions are raised after most of the group's leaders snubbed this week's summit in Kuwait. Instead of discussing the blockade against Qatar, the UAE announced a new separate military cooperation organisation with Saudi Arabia. Will that shift the balance of power in the Gulf? And what does it mean for the GCC's future? This is Inside Story. Hello there and welcome to the programme. I'm Laura Kyle. Every December, leaders from the Six-Nation Gulf Cooperation Council gather for a summit meeting. The organisation brings together Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, the UAE and Oman. But 2017 has been a year of crisis for the bloc. Three members, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain and the Emirates, are blockading a fourth, Qatar. Many observers doubted that this year's summit would even take place. And when it did, the two-day meeting ended after only a few hours. We'll get to our guests in just a moment, but first, Mohammed Jamjoom reports from Kuwait City.
While the announcement that this year's Gulf Cooperation Council summit would go ahead as planned in Kuwait came as a surprise to many, it also brought renewed hope for a diplomatic breakthrough that might end the Gulf crisis. Upon his arrival in Kuwait on Tuesday, Qatar's Emir, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, issued a statement expressing sincere gratitude toward Kuwait's Emir, Sheikh Sabah Al Ahmed Al Sabah, and his wishes for the success of the current summit, stressing that the current situation in the region required the Council's members to band together against all odds and challenges. But even before the summit officially kicked off, divisions were very much on display. First, the United Arab Emirates announced it had formed a new economic and military partnership with Saudi Arabia that would be separate from the GCC. Then, Saudi Arabia, the UAE and Bahrain decided not to send their respective leaders to Kuwait.
It could be that it is embarrassing for some of the leadership of the countries on the quartet, the boycotting countries, to turn up, and then, therefore they sent a lower level. But it could be that they really just wanted to have this as just to show that the GCC actually still exists and the summit is going to take place, but nothing else is going to happen, which is really disappointing in that case.
In the end, a summit that is usually slated for 2 days ended after only a few hours. Kuwait's Emir said his country will continue mediating in the dispute.
Recent months have seen a lot of troubles, but the wisdom of my brothers, of the leaders of the Gulf countries, managed to calm things down, and our meeting today will lead us to continue playing the role that will live up to the aspirations of our people. In order to have certain mechanisms to sort out disputes with guarantees that will allow everyone to abide by these rules.
Sheikh Sabah added that the Gulf has faced painful and negative developments over the past 6 months due to the rift.
6 months to the day since the beginning of the blockade against Qatar, some here in Kuwait say the fact that representatives of all member countries actually showed up means that this summit should ultimately be considered a success. Others, however, say that today's developments call into question if the GCC, an institution which at its core is meant to highlight regional unity, will be able to survive much longer. Mohammed Jamjoom, Al Jazeera, Kuwait.
OK, well, let's bring in our guests now. And here in the studio with me, Abdulaziz Al-Hor. He's an academic researcher. Also in Doha, we have Abdullah Babood, who's featured in our early package, and he's the director of the Gulf Studies programme at Qatar University. And in Kuwait City, we have Abdullah Al-Shehabi. He's a professor of political science at Kuwait University. Welcome, gentlemen, all of you. Abdullah Al-Shehabi, you were with us on Inside Story a couple of weeks ago when we had a warning that if the GCC summit did not take place, the GCC was effectively dead. It sort of half took place, didn't it? So where does that leave the GCC?
Well, first of all, it's really unfortunate what happened. The GCC summit, by all means, was not in the offerings that it will take place, but then suddenly something happened, it took place, and it seems that somebody played out of the script rather than sticking to the script, and because of that we We have the strangest summit just happened yesterday. It was the lowest representation by the heads of the states from the GCC. 2/3 of the GCC did not send their heads of states. It was the shortest summit in history of the GCC. It wasn't the topics that were discussed were not really the things that we were looking forward to. I'm really very sad. We are sad for the GCC status at this stage because this crippling GCC crisis that has been going on for over 6 months now has really left its indelible marks on the not only on the stability and the future of the GCC, but also on the people's minds that where do we go next from here? That was a missed opportunity for all the GCC leaders to show up, to sit down in a frank talk behind closed doors and discuss all the issues, air out all the issues that are really bothering each other, put Qatar to the test. Qatar is being accused of not adhering to 2013 and 2014 agreements that took place in Riyadh. Why Qatar did that, and reconcile this really ongoing crisis that is really leaving a lot of doubt about where we are heading in a region that is really sick and tired of turbulence, of militarization, of instability, and of crises that are all over the place. The last thing we want is a GCC that used to be the most perfect body in the Arab world to also catch the flu or catch the disease of Arab fragmentation and splintering. So the
Abdulaziz, if I could just jump in there, because I want to get an idea of just how surprised people were to see such low-level delegations being sent by countries like Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain.
Actually, you know, depression becomes the gap between expectations and reality. Yes, people are surprised by the low representation of the blockade countries in the summit. However, I mean, if we go to the Gulf Council, actually from 1981 till 2001, there was nothing happening. I mean, it was like a real PR gathering more than a real council, a real cooperation, a real integration effort. Just only from 2001, they started to do some integration, some coordination, and people started to see some value for this council or this Gulf cooperation. However, I mean, since the Gulf crisis, people were hoping that this might become an event or an opportunity, I would say even a golden opportunity for these countries to come together, to sit on the table and present and discuss all the concerning issues. Because, I mean, these blockading countries have issues or concerned about some issues with Qatar, and Qatar the same thing. They have some issues with these blockading countries. I mean, the only option is the dialogue. We have to sit, we have to discuss, we have to transparently discuss these issues and agree once for all to, I mean, settle this. Not only discussing the topics, but even talking about the future, how to prevent such thing to happen, to have a mechanism for conflict resolution that really has some strategic measures.
But given that none of that did happen, has the GCC been shown up to be much weaker than it had been thought in previous years?
It is actually indeed. However, I would say still GCC cooperation or council is extremely important. Yes, it's underperforming. Yes, it's under the expectation of the GCC people, but this body is still extremely important because the problem is not with the idea. The problem is with the performance, and we can always fix the performance.
Abdullah Babood, would you agree that the GCC is extremely important? And if so, why do Saudi Arabia and the UAE seem to give it such little credence?
I agree with the previous speakers that the GCC is important for everybody. I think the fact that the GCC states came to the meeting, to the summit, although at a lower level in terms of participation, it shows that everybody do really care about the GCC. I think the smaller Gulf states care about the GCC. Saudi Arabia does care about the GCC as well. It's a regional integration project that is still developing. Yes, we have lots of criticism about its achievement and aspiration because our hopes are higher than what has been achieved. But it has nevertheless functioned and has been a benefit to everybody altogether, all the Gulf states. Now, when it comes to Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, I think this is, I would also agree that this is a missed opportunity because this meeting, this summit could have overcome so many problems that the region is facing. And the turmoil that we are living in, you know, the unfolding crises that are happening around us, the GCC summit could have had an opportunity to get together and to overcome these crises or come up with policies. The Saudis and the Emiratis, I think, announced this cooperation agreement, bilateral cooperation agreement between them, which is also understood. There are a lot of bilateral cooperation agreements between member states, and we could also have a two-speed GCC. There is nothing wrong with it, but we need to make sure that the GCC as a collectivity still functions intact, because only through regional cooperation and integration of all the GCC states that stability and security in the region and prosperity can be ensured.
Let's talk a little bit more about that new partnership that was announced by the UAE on the day of this summit. Abdullah Al-Shehabi, I mean, do you agree with Abdullah Babood that there's nothing wrong with this new bilateral cooperation, that it can exist alongside the GCC and not threaten the GCC's unity?
Well, it seems that the timing of this announcement of the partnership between the strong two players now, the strongest two players in the GCC now, very clearly, there is within the GCC an alliance that is emerging very clearly between Saudi Arabia and UAE along with Bahrain to form some kind of partnership. Maybe Bahrain will join this partnership in the future. But this is really does not bode well with the future of the GCC. This could cause splintering of the GCC into a comatose GCC, the 6 countries as it has been known since 1981, that was formed as a collective security organization to deter or to strengthen the 6 countries' position vis-à-vis the Iranian Revolution, the turmoil in Afghanistan, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, the Iran-Iraq war, the Iranian Revolution, and other upheavals at that time. Now we are at a stage that a dysfunctional GCC is a reality now after what we've seen over the last 6 months and after the summit that took place yesterday. It was a fiasco summit, in my opinion, that probably some people are arguing this could be the last GCC summit as we know it. Okay. So there is a plan B, it seems now on the works, and that is to have strengthening this new alliance. And plus announcing it, the timing was very strange. Sure. Not on the eve of the summit, on the dawn of the summit, and what kind of messages are they sending at this stage? So there is a lot of questions here. But one thing for sure is that
as Abdullah said,
the GCC won't be the same after.
In fact, I mean, if I just may comment on the previous point, if we talk about GCC, we are talking about the 12th strongest economy in the world, with the size of 1.6 trillion US dollars. We are talking about the 5th economy in terms of foreign trades. We are talking about the 4th economy in terms of exportation after China, United States, and Germany. It's a huge loss. It's a huge loss if we sacrifice this cooperation or this council, because we can leverage military-wise, economy-wise, I mean, education-wise.
But really, how much has the GCC actually achieved?
Yeah, I mean, this is the point. I mean, GCC is a resource hub. If we leverage on this, then, I mean, no problem that Qatar has a very strong relationship, MOUs and the treaties with Oman, and very special relationship with Oman. United Arab Emirates can have its relationship and the treaties and the MOUs and whatever cooperation with Saudi Arabia. I mean, this is not the problem. The problem is this replacing the GCC Council or cooperation or not? Is this and really contradict or not? But to have, I mean, bilateral agreements with anybody in the world, I mean, that is not the issue. What is the intention? Is the intention to replace or to just keep away from Qatar and the rest of GCC countries? Or is this something that will correspond to some certain needs? I think Qatar went with the highest representation in this summit to approve several points. One of them, that they are really keen at making sure that this cooperation and this council is really valuable for them, and they want to continue supporting it. Number two, that they are have nothing to hide in terms of willingness to discuss and to dialogue any issue, any concern. I mean, they want full representation to show that we are here, please.
Okay. Okay, I mean, let's just take a look at how the rest of the world is looking at this uncertainty with the GCC. I mean, all 6 GCC members are US allies, and the Pentagon has some of its largest overseas bases in the region. Speaking to reporters as he travelled back to Washington this week after a visit to Kuwait, US Defence Secretary James Mattis called for unity, saying, for the United States, we need the GCC structure. We need the unity of the GCC in terms of a stabilising influence in the Gulf. We're looking for cohesion in the GCC and the peaceful resolution of the regional disputes. Abdullah Babood, how much does the US depend on the GCC? How unnerved will the US, for example, be by seeing these bilaterals, new partnerships merge between Saudi and the UAE?
I think the US and also other international strategic partners like the EU, like Russia, like China are seriously taking the GCC as an important interlocutor. And they believe that the stability and security and prosperity in the region doesn't only help the GCC states, but also help the whole region around it. As you look around the GCC, you see so many countries in turmoil. And the GCC could be kind of the locomotive that pulls these countries together and help them to recover because of its economic power that has just been explained by Dr. Abdulaziz. I believe that the US policy in the region, strategy in the region relies heavily on all the GCC states being a coherent and cohesive organization in terms of fighting against terrorism, in terms of US policy towards Iran and other area in Afghanistan, etc. They look at the GCC states as a group. And as you know, Qatar is a major base for the US for the US commitment in the region. And to exclude one state or the other for nepotism, for silly things amongst and idiosyncrasies amongst GCC leadership, it does not bode well for these international partners, and especially for the US. They see it as a threat to their interest in the region, and they want to correct it.
If I could just jump in there, because I want to get an idea beyond the military bases and the presence of US troops in the region. Obviously, that's a highly important aspect. But beyond that, just how effective has the GCC been for the US's policy in the Middle East?
Well, as my colleagues have stated clearly, the United States would like to see a GCC still function, not dysfunctional. But unfortunately, the Trump administration has given, and Trump probably himself through his positions and through his tweets at the early stage of the crisis, have given really false impressions and false hopes to some parties in this conflict, that he's siding with them, and then he took neutral position, and that really did not help the issue. The United States has contributed immensely between the knee-jerk Trump administration and personal approach to the crisis and the establishment that has weighed itself very strongly in favor of a neutrality. And because of that, we see now United States has lost its credibility in a way, although it wants to see GCC functional rather than dysfunctional, but its impact has really dwindled because of its flip-flopping over the issue. Plus, the other point is that the GCC still represents a major source of energy, but with the fracking and the United States more dependent on its own oil and energy output, the importance and the significance of GCC when it comes to the oil production and export has really dwindled in the eyes of the United States and maybe in other countries in the world. But still, there is a stake here for stability and security and a functional GCC. Because of that, GCC will continue to be significant and important. It's too early to write its obituary at this stage because it is needed. It is the strongest part of the Arab world, and we hope that this crisis will blow over sooner rather than later, because the more it drags on, the more it really sinking us all in an abyss that nobody really is driving at or wants to see it in.
Well, let's look at what can happen next with the crisis. Abdulaziz, it seems to be a general agreement that the GCC summit was a missed opportunity to talk about the dispute. So what next?
I think, when we even look at the EU or United States position in terms of GCC, if we don't value ourselves, how do we expect them to value us? If we don't value the Gulf Cooperation and Council, how do we ask others to value it? Actually, positioning the Gulf Cooperation or Council starts from within, not from outside. If we value it, if we support it, if we are serious about it, then we can expect others to respect us. The future, we have to maintain this Gulf Cooperation Council. Yes, we are not in the best at the best time. There is like a big gap here. But I think this can be rectified. As it happened 2013, 2014, this is not the first time it happens, and maybe it's not the last time will happen. But if we have the right measures, we have the right policies, we have an agreement that we deal with conflict resolution whenever it happens for any reason in a certain way, then this will have a real future. We have.
I'm just going to jump in there just to get, because we're coming to the end. Abdullah Babood, I just want to get an idea from you as to how this rift can be healed. What concrete next step can be taken?
Well, I would also echo what has been said, that the GCC summit was a missed opportunity for everybody concerned. And it seems that the blockading countries don't want to give up, and they don't want to sit on the table to negotiate. And that is a real pity, because this summit could have been a real chance for them to do so. I think what is being demanded from Qatar is totally unacceptable. The Qatari government has said so, but they are willing to sit down on the table and negotiate. And there is no way out except negotiation. Now, what has been happening, this boycott itself has really damaged the GCC project. The GCC is a rule-based organization, and one of their agreements is the common market, which is a free flow of goods, people, and capital. And if you boycott one country, you means that you're running against what you have decided as leaders in an agreement.
Okay.
And the decision did not go to the Supreme Council to decide. It was decided outside GCC mechanisms. So I think the leadership of these countries have to realize that they are not jeopardizing only the security and the stability and prosperity of the region, they are also jeopardizing the function of the GCC and its future.
Okay, there we will have to leave our discussion for today. Many thanks to all our guests for joining us, Abdulaziz Al-Hor, Abdullah Babood and Abdullah Al-Shehabi. And thank you too for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website, that's aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, do go to our Facebook page, that's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Laura Kyle, and the whole team here, bye for now.